Hi everyone, welcome to episode 4 of this Additive Talks series, season 4. If you are joining us for the first time, make yourself comfortable. As a reminder, Additive Talks are simply a series of panels that focus on discussing the use of additive manufacturing technologies in a given industry. If you have been here before, thank you for listening to our insight into the world of AM. My name is Katie Sinze, Managing Editor at 3D Additive Media. And without further ado, I would like to give the floor to my wonderful panelists here around this virtual table so that they can introduce themselves as well as the company they represent. And I will start with you, Andy.
Okay. Andy Miller, I'm the current Chief Operating Officer at Restore 3D. I was also a founding member, so I've been with it since the beginning, which was about 2017. Restore 3D is a medical device manufacturer. We specialize in personalized implants, 3D printed implants primarily. And we started in foot and ankle and have since kind of grown across the body and to touched nearly just about every bone at this point. So.
Thank you very much, Andy. It's a pleasure to have you here. What about you, Mark? Can you please tell us a little bit more about you?
Of course. My name is Mark Nebel. I am head of the market segment medical systems at High Performance Polymers from Evonik. And yeah, I'm glad to be here. We have a nice portfolio of polymers for the medical industry, such as Westerkeep, and but also from my colleagues from the healthcare business, also a bioresorbable product, which is Resomer. And I'm happy to talk today a little bit more about it and the use of 3D printing.
Thank you very much, Mark. Well, today's conversation is about, the key differences between polymer and, metal 3D printed implants. I believe the conversation is quite crucial, is quite pivotal for an industry like healthcare, given the fact that while healthcare is, one of the first, if not really the first, vertical industry adopting and, propelling AM technologies. And implants are obviously one of the top applications in the field. So my first question will be for you, Andy. We know the key focus of your insights around this table will probably be the use of metallic powders for implant. However, for those who maybe are not part of the medical field in the audience, what do you call instrumentation and why do you choose to print them in polymer?
Sure, yeah. So just kind of giving a broad picture, Restored's value proposition really is the personalization of implants, which for us are primarily metal right now, specifically titanium and cobalt chrome. And with those personalized implants, we often have to supply matching personalized instrumentation. That instrumentation enhances the surgeon's ability to complete the case. So instrumentation might include things like a size trial, for example, which looks exactly like the implant, but is made in polymer, and it might have a handle attached to it. And the purpose of it would be to mimic the geometry of the different sizes of implants we've provided, so that the surgeon can easily put them in and out of the patient's anatomy and kind of check and determine what size they want to go with without damaging an implant. There's many other examples of instrumentation we might print out of polymers, things like impactors, inserters, cutting and drilling guides that match a patient's anatomy, and even anatomical models. So for surgeons that want a visual of the patient's bony anatomy before they get into surgery, we can provide that. These are all specific to the patient, and so as you can imagine, they're single use. You can't reuse those things. They are designed specifically for that patient's anatomy, for that case. And because of that, it generally makes more sense for them to be polymer just because the post-processing is easier, and we're not tying up capacity of our more expensive metal printers.
Yeah. Okay, good. Well, thanks, Andy. Mark, we've met many healthcare professionals, in the field who believe that applications in this specific sector are limited by material. Is it a cliche or a fact, according to you?
I think it's a cliche, because it's definitely not only the material. I mean, material might play an important role of it, but it's more than a material. It's a whole ecosystem of material, printer, software, and also a regulatory pathway, which has, let's say, combined and work together to come to a good result. So, yeah, therefore, it's not only the material.
Okay, good. Just before we move forward, in the conversation, a quick reminder for the audience. We will pause at some point during the conversation to answer any questions you may have. You have a Q&A chat, on your screen. Please make sure to use it to share your questions, to share your remarks. And around 4 o'clock, we will pause and let Andy and Mark answer all of them. So, yeah. So to both of you, would you say there are specific implants that can be produced with polymer materials only, and specific implants that can be produced with metallic materials only? And then I would like to hear Andy first on this specific question.
Sure. Yeah. So I would say yes. Definitely there are applications where you could use polymers and metals somewhat interchangeably, with different sort of advantages and disadvantages. One great example, of course, is going to be spine cages, right? There are plenty of 3D printed titanium ones on the market, and now we're seeing some 3D printed PEEK ones finally, which is a nice thing to see. But I think there are definitely applications where kind of only one is the feasible choice. A good example of that, we do a lot of custom implants. So for those who aren't familiar, in the US, there is what's called a custom device exemption, where if a patient has a need that cannot be met by off-the-shelf products, and they are sort of in a dire situation, we are able to make them a custom device that does not need to go through the traditional regulatory approvals beforehand. Now, of course, there's plenty of other requirements around that, but we do a lot of these sort of custom implants, and one's particular examples would be ones that replace large sections of your long bones. So, for example, your tibia, your femur, humerus, radius, ulna, all these bones. We often do cases where we're replacing large sections up to 150 millimeters or more of these bones. These implants a lot of times are going to have stems that are inserted into the remaining bone to hold them in place. And those stems are generally going to be subjected to very high loads, very high bending loads, to the point where, even in our 3D printed titanium, we are approaching the limit of what that material can handle. And so I would say it would be quite a challenge to do that in a polymer. I think you would have certain trade-off sacrifices you'd have to make in terms of geometry that might make the implant unattractive. The contrary to that, another example, of course, we launched Restore 3D originally around the idea of 3D printed personalized polymer airway stents, which we did with a soft polymer and FDM printers. Obviously, if it's going in your airway, you have to imagine it needs to be very compliant, very soft. While there are woven metallic stents, that's not something you could 3D print. So really, for that application, the polymers would be the only choice. So my answer is yes.
Okay, good. Okay, Mark, do you have a different opinion here?
I don't think I have a different opinion. I agree with most what Andy said. However, I mean, we also have to see what is the development and when does history start of polymer printing, or especially let's say implant polymer printing. And I was at the exhibition, I think in 2015, and at that time, let's say Kumovis, which is now part of the system, was not even founded. Yeah, so and the parts looked so from some other startup companies very ugly. And when we see now what kind of journey this industry did with high performance polymers, it's really impressive what we see now. Yeah, we see now really nice parts. We see open structures, porous structures, 3D printed of Keep, and so it's really nice to see the progress which can be done. And in future, maybe you can also include some carbon fiber materials to even get stiffer parts. So I think we are at still at a very early stage of polymer implant printing, and I'm really looking forward what still will come.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do want to just add to what he's saying there. I am very optimistic about polymer 3D printing. I don't want to make it sound like we are very excited kind of with the recent developments, and we kind of keep our eye on it, and I do think it's coming. But like Mark said, I agree. It's, I think, very early stages.
Yeah, thanks, Andy. Well, Mark, polymers can be also available in different forms, like powders for SLS, filaments, etc. For you, what is the type of material that easily comes to mind when it comes to, you know, fabricating an implant?
Yeah, I mean, there are two materials. There is one. I mean, at the beginning, you have to define yourself. Do you want to have a biostable product, or do you want to have a bioresorbable product? Yeah, and for biostable products, let's say which have a certain stiffness, maybe close to bone, to cortical bone or something like that, then you would use peak-based product, yeah, like our Keep, for example. And if you want to have a bioresorbable product, for example, for facial surgery at children or something like that, then a resomer could be a good material of choice. So it really depends on what kind of application you have in mind.
Okay, good. Well, given your expertise in the manufacturing process itself, for you, Andy, what advantages, you know, do healthcare professionals benefit from by choosing a high performance polymer material over a metallic for a given implant from a manufacturing standpoint, and vice versa?
Okay. So strictly from a manufacturing standpoint, what would they benefit from?
From a manufacturing standpoint, yeah.
So yeah, obviously putting aside, you know, the benefits of radiolucency, lower stiffness, you know, I think the major benefit of choosing polymer would be a reduced lead time. You know, a lot of what we do is, particularly it's for made to order products, right? And also in many instances, a lower cost as well. So I will say, just looking bigger picture, you know, metal printers generally have a much bigger and more painful learning curve and sort of a bigger barrier to entry.
Yeah.
Most med device manufacturers don't print metals in-house. They would outsource it to people who are very good at metal printing. And so generally they also have more laborious post-processing. So you've usually got some form of a heat treatment or hot isostatic pressing, which can be very expensive equipment as well. And then, of course, you've got to remove it from the substrate, for metals, right? You need specialized equipment just to get it off the build plate. And at Restore 3D, we've sort of insourced all of these to help eliminate this downside. But sort of speaking broadly, just about the benefits, typically with polymers, that's going to be much more insourced, in-house, quicker, cheaper than your metal implants. And then I think on the flip side, of course, because of the substantially greater mechanical strength, at least right now, metal implants afford a lot more flexibility, the design of your implants and what is actually possible to make. So you can incorporate design elements such as, super high porosity for bone ingrowth, and that porosity can be on any face or surface in any orientation you want it to be. You can incorporate design elements like, very thin or fine features that might not be mechanically robust as a polymer. So, even machined features, for example, if you need threads or anything, or if you need to machine in an interlocking component, metals are much more appropriate for that.
I'm curious to hear Mark's point of view here regarding polymer, especially polymer 3D printed implants. I mean, do we have like specific benefits that healthcare professionals, can benefit from when they rely on polymers?
Yeah, I mean, as Andy already mentioned, the properties are different, right? So in some cases, the elasticity of the polymer might bring some benefit. So it's not so stiff, so rigid sometimes. Yeah. So micro motion might be sometimes a good thing. And then, for example, at cancer treatment, you do a lot of images, yeah, and so therefore metal-free implants might also have some advantages, and you can look through it, yeah. So you can see what happens. You can see maybe even bone ingrowth. Yeah, for example, if you use Westerkeep fusion, which is a biphasic calcium phosphate field peak. There you can nicely see how osteoconductivity will go forward, and bone ingrowth might happen. You have some open structure, some porous structure. So yeah, I think there are a lot of benefits in using polymers, but it's a case-by-case decision. Yeah? You have to know your requirements. You have to know what kind of mechanical properties you need, and then make your decision.
Yes. Well, about that, Mark, there sometimes we have this confusion between, the type of polymer materials that can be used for 3D printed implants. Do you think all of them are necessarily what we call biopolymers, or high performance materials, or both?
I mean, first of all, biomaterials is already confusing because some mean they are bio-based, yeah, and that has nothing to do with bio-based. It's more, the medical polymers are more about biocompatibility, yeah, and again, biocompatibility. There's the ISO 10993, which shows you or which gives you a recommendation what kind of biocompatibility testing you can perform, yeah, to show the suitability of the material or the medical device. Actually, you have to do that at the medical device, and it depends on the nature of contact and the duration, if it is long-term, short-term. And so yeah, if you have a short-term skin contact application, you might have a bigger choice of polymers available than for, let's say, using a hard wall. Yeah, and there you have blood contact, you have long-term contact, and so again, depending on the application, your choice of materials will narrow down very quickly, and at the end, in most cases, I mean, or in a lot of cases, PEEK or Keep in our case as an implant grade is might be the only choice. Yeah.
Okay, good. Well, if you had to take one application, Andy, and then we will pause at this point after you reply to these questions to answer a couple of audience. If you had to take one application, and maybe compare that with the conventional manufacturing process, what material properties can lead to the creation of of a better, yeah, an enhanced 3D printed implant?
Okay, so I believe I understand this one correctly, and so when I think of the benefits of 3D printing that we're leveraging for our implants, I think there's a few of them. Primarily, the ones would be the ease of personalization, of course, and then the ability to add sort of these complex porous structures.
Yeah, the obvious ones, yeah.
Yes, yeah. So, when I think of specific examples for us, and you'll have to forgive me, I had some demos and I left them at my desk, but I do have a few here to show we'll be close. One particular example, we have a total talus implant, which we have recently been able to provide through a humanitarian device exemption. This is what it looks like, basically. Ignore this little thing on the bottom here. I'm going to hold it up like this, but this is a talus bone, effectively. It is the bone underneath your tibia in your ankle, for those who are not familiar with it. This bone generally is, you can almost think of it like free floating. It's surrounded by the bones of, of course, your tibia, your heel bone, and the bones of your midfoot. This implant is 3D printed out of cobalt chrome. And as you can see, for the most part, they are usually highly polished all around because you've got other bones kind of articulating against it. But in some cases, you might incorporate a sort of porous structure, which you can kind of see here. This is the porous structure we use on basically all of our implants. You're probably familiar with this. The gyroid structure is fully interconnected and porous, very high surface area, very high strength. So anyways, as you can imagine, this is sort of an amorphous, very anatomic shape, and it varies considerably from person to person. If this isn't a perfect match, it's not going to work. And so, 3D printing, obviously you could make a fully solid version of this with machining. 3D printing makes the creation of these far easier, far more cost effective. And so, that I would say is sort of one aspect of it, right? Traditionally, by the way, really almost kind of prior to 3D printing, being available in the medical field, they would have looked to fuse this patient's ankle, or even in some cases look to amputate a foot. So if this bone is degrading, which it has a very poor blood supply, it is prone to degradation either after trauma or in response to other conditions that may cause bone degeneration. The patient generally will be in a lot of pain, and so traditionally they would have kind of reamed this bone out and fused their ankle together, or looked at amputation.
Well,
yeah. And then I think the other aspect, of course, as I already kind of touched on, is this sort of highly porous structure, which again we sort of integrate into most of our implants. I have another one here, which is just a tiny wedge, which we use in foot and ankle procedures. This one might be harder to see.
Yeah, no, we can see that. Don't worry.
Yeah, so you can kind of see very highly porous, in this sort of structure with the pores and high surface area encourages bony ingrowth, right? This is a structure, by the way, it would be impossible to make in any other way, particularly in the sort of orientations and size and way we've got it here. but has shown to have very high strength, very high fatigue performance, very high surface area as well for bone ingrowth. We've seen some great clinical results, follow-ups from some of our earlier cases back around 2018, 2019, where we are seeing considerable bone growth into and around these implants, which means that this sort of integration is hopefully being enhanced, right? And hopefully improving the longevity of these things. And, I think this pore structure also sort of, in many ways, helps to address some of the complaints about metals, which is the overall stiffness, the radiopacity, and sort of the non-permanent, non-integrating nature of metal implants. But with this pore structure, you actually kind of improve all of those things. So.
Okay, good. Let's pause for a couple of minutes and then move to the Q&A chat, or see what we have here from the audience. Well, question number 2. The first one is hello everyone, so it's not really a question. So question number 2 from Eliseo. From a healing standpoint, how would you compare the healing process of a patient that receives a 3D printed implant made from polymers versus the same made from metals? It's a tricky question because, well, I will give the floor to Mark first, maybe to answer from the polymer perspective, if he has any experience in the field.
Yeah, so from my point of view, I mean, when we entered that market also with polymers and especially with our Westerkeep, we also did some animal studies and compared that also with, for example, titanium. And the results were quite positive, and especially when you would like to, let's say, have a very good osteoconductivity, we added an additional polymer, which is PEEK with biphasic calcium phosphate, so Westerkeep fusion, where we see really good results on that. And next to that, you still can do surface treatments. Yeah? For example, Curitiba, who just received now their latest 510K for lumbar spinal cage device. They have a HA coating on it, and they have excellent results. So no adverse effects and a very good osseointegration. So it's not again only the material. When you listen to Curitiba, they say structure drives biology. Yeah? So which means it also has a lot to do with the surface and the surface structure. And they have some porous surface structure, which seems to be very successful. They have now 1 year post surgery results, and it looks very promising. Yeah, they have 9 printers running 24/7, so very good.
Well, thanks, Mark. Andy, do you have a different point of view here from the healing standpoint? I know we discussed this question from the manufacturing standpoint a couple of minutes ago. Yeah.
I do have a little bit different. I don't know if I want to say it's completely opposing. We of course have done studies ourselves, and we've compared our porous titanium against traditional PEEK and PEEK cages. And actually, this is a study, if anyone is interested, if you go on the Restored website, it is linked there under our publications section. The study is called Novel 3D Printed Lattice Structured Titanium Cages Evaluated in an Ovine Model of Interbody Fusion. And generally what we've seen is with our porous structures, the sort of pull-out strength, or I believe that it was pull-out strength was the metric in this study, was actually far greater with the titanium. Well, not necessarily far greater, greater with the titanium cages than as compared to PEEK, because we were actually seeing very substantial ingrowth into our porous structures. Now, I think it's one study. Of course, not here to. I think it's a little early to say one is definitively better than the other, but I do think that having a porous layer on your metal implants goes a long way to sort of resolving any sort of difference that you might see between polymer and metal.
Okay.
Just a question, did you compare it with porous PEEK as well, or just with machine PEEK?
I would have to go back and read it. Let me see here. I actually have it open now. So there was a PEEK cage. I am not sure what those cages looked like, but
because as I said before, it's also a lot about the surface structure.
Exactly.
And if you have a porous surface on titanium, maybe it would be good to do also, or to compare it with a porous PEEK structure. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. I unfortunately am not the scientist that did those. I would have to go back and look at it, see what they did. But yes, I completely agree. Right? If you'd want to compare porous to porous, but ultimately, I think my answer would be, I do believe that porous structures in metals do sort of kind of enhance that response and sort of lessen the benefit of polymers, I would say.
Yeah, well, keep in mind as well that there are no wrong answers here. There are just different insights.
No worries, no.
Because I don't want it to become like a real. I mean, like a fight between which polymer or which material is really better.
The other one. And sometimes it's also perception, and perception. Is reality, so it's sometimes very difficult to fight or to argue against perceptions.
Exactly. Well, the next question number 3 is coming from Erad. One question: how do both procedures ensure that the surface, possibly also the inner surface of lattice structures, is free of inadequately bound particles that may become detached after implantation and cause problems in the body? I think that we've lost Andy, so I will let him come back, but then I will give you the floor first, Mark, so that you can answer these questions.
Thank you, Erhard, for giving me such a difficult question. Actually, I might not have understood it 100% correctly. So I can't give a really good answer on that, to be honest.
Well, we can maybe while waiting for Andy, we can maybe try to answer the other questions from Erad about PEEK. PEEK is a rather neutral material for the biological system. How can the growth behavior be improved?
Yeah, again, the on-growth behavior can be improved by 2 actions. One is to add some bioactive additive like biphasic calcium phosphate. And the second one is to create a surface structure which has let's say improves the osteoconductivity. And the third one is, of course, to do it with a coating technology, like HA coating or plasma coating or whatsoever.
Yeah, I can feel like my Herald is quite happy to have very difficult questions for you. And then Andy, before there was that technical issue, we were trying to No problem. We were trying to answer this question number 3 from Erad. How do both procedures ensure that the surface is free of inadequately bound particles that may become detached after implantation and cause problems in the body?
Yeah, it's a good question. So we, with our porous structures, as part of our processing, we use a blasting procedure, which basically has shown to knock off any sort of what we call loosely bound particles of that nature. And so, of course, we've done studies to show that, just through simple magnification, that it does in fact do that. But then, furthermore, you of course have your cleaning validation, right, where you're doing a very exhaustive extraction on sort of a worst case implant to make sure that there are no additional particles coming off once it's gone through all of your processing.
Okay. Okay, good. And then, well, question number 5 from Matt Grady. Would you say, for instance, that a material that requires less testing could be prioritized over another one? That's an interesting question for both categories of materials. So, Mark, do you want to go first? Hello?
I would say yes. Yeah. Of course, you in the selection of the material, you should always involve people from quality and regulatory. So it's more for regulatory reasons. Yeah, that you use material which has, let's say, longer history and more cases in the, let's say, in the field where it's all about trust and risk management. I think it goes in that direction. Therefore, of course, if you can use a material which already has shown that it is suitable in certain applications, then it's let's say you might choose that one versus another one which is maybe not so well introduced to the market.
Yeah. Yeah, thanks. Correct. Andy, do you have a different perspective, opinion on this specific question?
Not really. Yeah, I mean, of course, I think you're going to prioritize ones that would require less testing. We, of course, tend to lean towards materials that, for example, have established biocompatibility data or, are already quite strong. And, that said, we have, of course, implemented materials where we've taken on ourselves to do that biocomp testing, but it is a risk, right? If it's a new material, it might not pass, and that testing is very expensive. Yeah. So naturally, yes, you're going to prioritize those that would require less testing.
Yes. And I think the next question number 6, is a little bit linked to that one, as it addresses a couple of standards or requirements. So are there specific standards you need to meet during the fabrication of polymer/metal 3D printed implants? Well, what I would like to know when you will answer this question from Steve is, do we have like specific requirements for each category of materials that is being used when fabricating an implant? Mark?
Yeah, I mean, the polymer printing of implants is rather new, right? So, and I would say I know about the standard of the metal printing.
Okay.
But this is not, you cannot really transfer it to polymer. So it's all about risk management, and therefore you have to go into discussions maybe with the FDA to check if you are on the right pathway. Yeah. So as far as I know, there are no really 100% strong guidelines on that, because it's just still too new. However, for these companies who have now succeeded with the 510K, I know it was not an easy pathway,
Yes.
but they have quite good experience now on how to navigate through that kind of jungle.
Okay, good. Interesting. Andy?
So yes, the answer for us is for, I'm obviously speaking of metals here, metal implants. There are standards. So there's an ASTM standard we follow for 3D printed titanium as well as for cobalt chrome as well. And those standards give mechanical test criteria. And we test every single build that we produce to make sure it is meeting that criteria before that product is released to market. Now, it kind of gets taken a step further, and this has been a point of discussion with the FDA all along with us and other manufacturers, is that when you do your product testing, when you're submitting a product for regulatory approval and you do your testing, your product, as a minimum for us, is going to hit that ASTM level, but often it is very difficult to dial in the properties of your printer to exactly hit that ASTM level so that you know you are making a worst case implant when you do testing. Instead, what happens is you print your test samples and it ends up being a little higher than the ASTM, and then you test those samples, and what often ends up happening is you get then pinned to that higher criteria above the ASTM. And so, we've been working on ways to deal with this, but the answer to the question is the answer is yes. It is a very tightly controlled thing, and yeah.
I like the fact that you start explaining and then you give the short answer just right after. Yeah. Well, question number 7 is actually for you, from Ryan. For you, Andy, how is the porous surface on the TALUS implant assembled to the cobalt chrome portion of the implant?
It's all printed as one. This is all one print. So all of this is cobalt chrome. We've seen equally good results for ingrowth in our porous cobalt chrome as we have for titanium. So this prints as one, and then of course we highly polish the parts that need to be highly polished. We blast any sort of porous regions to remove any loosely adhered powder. But yeah, there is no assembly.
Okay, good. And then question number 8. What are your thoughts on smart implants? Do you think the market is ready for them? That's good, because that was one of the questions I also had in mind, and I would love to hear Mark here first.
Yeah, I mean, you hear a lot about smart implants, and I'm sure sooner or later they might come. However, I think again now we just saw the first 510Ks for spinal implants and for CMF implants for example, from 3D Systems. And so I think these are the first markets who have to be developed. And then the next big thing, I think, is, at least for polymer printing, maybe not the smart implants, maybe it's really the point of care treatment. Yeah, so to have this 3D printer in the hospital, for example, like in Basel with Professor Thieringer, and to have patient-specific implants directly printed in the hospital who have established a certain quality and regulatory department, so that everything is fine also with authorities. I think that's the first thing. Smart implants, I'm not sure if they have to be 3D printed or maybe in combination with injection molding and then 3D printed. So but I think there's some way to go.
Yeah. Okay, good. I don't know either if they absolutely need to be 3D printed or if they need to be combined during the manufacturing process with injection molding. Any thoughts on that, Andy?
Yeah, so to me, smart implants could mean quite a few different things. But I think if we're generally talking about implants with some higher level of function than just sitting passively in the body, then yeah, certainly I think there's a lot of exciting frontiers in this space. If even if we confine it to 3D printed versions, things like 3D printing of shape memory materials like nitinol, which is a shape memory metal. That's one example. That could provide for personalized implants with some form of mechanical action to it, such as like a sustained compression. I know there's been considerable attention on printing that material. It's a tough one to figure out. So I think more work can be done there. But I do think there is very exciting potential for it. And of course, there's a host of shape memory polymers as well. I think even beyond that, you look at tissue regeneration. There's of course tons of attention on bioprinting and the potential there. And typically that would include biodegradable polymers or even organic materials. I've even heard of 3D printing of biodegradable metals like magnesium and iron and whatnot. And I think that could also be exciting for many reasons, right? You get some load bearing capacity, but also you get biodegradable material. I think the list goes on. Of course, there's drug-eluting materials, even like multi-material printing. So yeah, I think the industry is ready, but I don't think technologically we are quite there yet for a lot of those.
Yeah. Okay, good. Question number 10 is for you, Mark, from Nadim. What role does surface roughness play in optimizing the biological performance and mechanical stability of peak-based implants?
I mean, again, I think the structure, I come back to the expression structure drives biology. So historically, the implants were machined with very, let's say, flat surface. And there, maybe the osteoconductivity was not as good as in some cases expected. And so with these porous structures, and as Andy also showed with his metal implants, he has great results. And so we more or less have just to mimic what was going on a couple of years in the metal 3D printing world, and copy that to the polymer world, and then add a little bit salt and pepper, and then we are there.
Yeah. Like it's a good recipe. Okay, thanks. Thank you, Mark. Well, I think that's it from from the audience. We no longer have any questions left. And then my last question, maybe to wrap up this conversation, will be for you to tell us, the next step, for your respective company in this field and on this specific topic. So maybe Andy, can you go first? What will be the next step for Restore 3D? Yeah.
Sure. So we're still fairly young. I started in 2017. Our first surgery was in 2018. Or yes, 2018.
Oh, that's good.
Losing it now. So for us, we are continuing to kind of expand into different areas of medicine. We started in foot and ankle. We're kind of branching into upper extremity and just about every area of orthopedics that you can imagine. And so we are, of course, doing our custom personalized products, but looking to establish more 510K cleared products, particularly patient-specific products. So really, we are focused on bringing our mission and belief in personalized implants to more people through more products. And so with that, we, of course, continually evaluate new printers, new technologies. We've got, of course, our eye on peak 3D printing, watching it closely, and you know, looking for the right way to slot it in for us. So that's sort of what's next for us.
Yeah. Okay. Well, if just for my personal, information and for online media, if you ever explore big 3D printing that you achieve an application, please feel free to drop me an email. I'll be really eager to discover what you will achieve, in this specific area. Well, to back to you, Mark. What will be the next step for Evonik High Performance Polymers division specifically?
Yeah, I mean, we see ourselves as, let's say, facilitator for this industry, and providing the right material solutions for all these 3D printing technologies. I mean, we have the powder, the PA12 for the SLS, we have the PEEK for FDM, and also different solution of resume in powder and also in filament form. So we might further work on next generation material solutions, maybe with some additional features like carbon fiber, which we just introduced to the market, Westerkeep fusion with better osseointegration, and try to listen carefully what the market needs, and then work with our R&D team and our regulatory team to come with new things. We are very excited, and again, this is a very young industry. There is a lot of potential, and especially when you again come back to this point of care topic, this can be a big change to the supply chain, and so I'm really looking forward to that.
Thank you very much, Mark. Well, that's it. Thank you, Andy. Thank you, Mark, for joining us around this virtual table. Thanks to the audience for following us until the end of this episode, and for sharing, your thoughts and questions on this topic. If you have any other questions, that come to your mind after this session, please feel free to send me an email or reach out to me on LinkedIn, and then I will share your questions with Mark and Andy, so that they can answer it, and we will be able to include their responses, in the recording that will be posted on our online media. Obviously, you can always reach out to them personally, via their personal channels. So that was also the last session for this summer. Please note that we will only be back in autumn for the next Additive Talks sessions. In the meantime, you could watch the recording of previous sessions and this one on our online media. So thanks again for staying with us, for listening to our insights into the world of AM. Well, and stay tuned and stay safe wherever you are in the world. Thanks again.